And good morning, actually, everybody. If you're turning in for this for the afternoon, I'm Mike Carey, pastor of First United Methodist Church in Nevada, Iowa, in the scenic center of Iowa. And I was having a little trouble getting my computer to cooperate here this morning. That was the reason for the lagging here and getting started. But doing it at almost 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning instead of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Probably on Wednesday, that's going to be the way it's going to go now for a while, just with the changes of schedules and whatnot. We've had to switch our staff meeting to Wednesday afternoons instead of Wednesday morning. Part of the reason for that is with COVID finally starting to slow down a little bit. I'm starting to get back. I'm able to get back into the nursing homes, and Indian Creek and Rolling Green would prefer to have me on Wednesday mornings, the third Wednesday of the month, and so to be able to do that, got to switch things around a little bit, and Wednesday afternoon works for a staff meeting just as well, maybe better for getting that done. But that means I've got to reschedule this. And since we have a degree of flexibility, at least on Wednesdays, I'm going to try to do it about 11 o'clock or so. And that way I get things done and I can get down to lunch at Rotary, which meets at Wednesdays at noon. So Wednesday is a busy day, and that's good. It's good to stay busy. Idleness is the devil's workshop, I believe, is the saying that goes. But we are working our way through the Gospel of Luke, and we are up to chapter 8, verse 40. And now this is a little bit of a different situation. We're going to read verses 40 to 42, and then we're going to skip over to verses 49 through 56. The reason for that is that Luke is going to be using what we call a literary device. He has a story within a story, and which is fine. It just means, though, that we've got to break things up a little bit as we consider things within the Scripture. And so we just got done with Luke's version of the story of the demoniac of the Gerasenes, and where Jesus sends the demons out into the herd of hogs, and the hogs end up in the water. And which reminds me, I wasn't able to get this done on Monday. Apologies for that. Just it's one of those days where some days you get the bear, and some days the bear gets you. And on Monday, the bear got me. So just things get crowded out. So it happens. But we're back, and we'll make the adjustments because that's what smart people do. We adjust. So from Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 42, and then we'll skip over to verse 49 to 56. Now, when Jesus came back, meaning from the other side of the Sea of Galilee, remember, most of the people there, the ones that were keeping the hogs, begged him to leave, get out of here. The only one that wanted him there was the demoniac who wanted to follow him. And when he came back across the Sea of Galilee, there was a crowd there that welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Now, why they were waiting for him, why did they assume that he would come back, we don't know, but apparently they did. And a man called Jairus came to him. He was the president of the synagogue. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and asked him to come to his house because he had an only daughter who was about 12 years of age, and she was dying. And as he went, the crowd pressed around him. And now this is where we move over now to verse 49. And while he was still speaking, someone came from the president's house, Jairus' house, and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the master anymore." Now Jesus heard this and said, "Don't be afraid. Just have faith, and she will be cured." And when he had come to the house, he allowed no one to come in with him except Peter and John and James and the girl's father and mother. Except Peter, John, and James and the girl's father and mother. And they were all weeping and waiting for her. "Stop weeping," he said, "for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed him down, because they were sure she was dead. And he took hold of her hand and said, "Little child, Talitha, arise." and her breath came back to her, and immediately she rose. And he told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were out of themselves with amazement, but he enjoined them to tell no one what has happened. Now, there are three things in this story that make the story very poignant and really resonates with us. First of all, you have a child, a 12-year-old child. Whenever we're dealing with children, for most of us, it hits a soft spot in our heart. If you're following the Winter Olympics, there's the controversy with the female Olympic figure skater and having tested positive for a controlled substance. Everybody's saying, well, she shouldn't be allowed to skate. One of the considering factors, which is allowed the Olympic Committee to allow her to skate, was that she's only 15. She's a minor. She's a child. So whenever we have children involved, it oftentimes is considered to be a mitigating factor. We take their childishness into consideration. And what isn't winsome about a child for most of us and most children? And so, and you can imagine children, for many parents, are totally dear to them. They are the light of their eye, the apple of their eye. And for a child, and even in this day and culture that we're talking about here, because remember, in this culture, women were not valued as men were. However, many families, daughters were considered to be a blessing just as much as sons, just within a different component. And so, and if you want to see a little bit better, get a little bit better idea of what that's like, go back and watch the movie Fiddler on the Roof, or go see it. It's playing around the area actually right now. But because Tevye, the main character, prayed for sons, for children, and what did he get? 3 daughters, as he says, as he prays to God. But he loves his daughter. They are the light of his life. And that's what the story revolves around, is tradition and the men that the 3 girls want to marry. And so, but this one is 12 years old. She's still a child. And so the story is poignant that way. She's also an only child. Now, for those of you who have one child or are an only child yourself, you understand the significance of what I'm talking about here. When you're an only child, things change. The circumstances are different. And so this child was, and her age 12, a 12-year-old, just on the cusp of becoming a teenager and entering into that, from going from being a child to a teenager to an adult. In that day and culture, that was a very narrow bridge to cross on, because it wasn't very long until they would be considered an adult. Boys were considered adults as soon as they were bar mitzvahed, which would be anywhere from age 12 to 14. And so at that point, you're considered a man. And so girls, as soon as they got old enough, they were considered to be women. They were adults. But 12, she's just on the cusp. And so that makes it even more poignant. It'd be one thing if it was a little child, another thing if it was an adult, but here she is, 12 years old. And so, and in that culture, she might have already been promised in marriage to someone. Arranged marriages were quite common. In fact, that was the way it was usually done in that day and culture. And so she might already be pledged to someone in marriage. So we have the little girl. We have Jairus, her father, who is president of the synagogue. Now, what does that mean? That means he's in charge of things at the synagogue, at what amounts to their church, their place of worship and education. He is the one who sees to it that everything happens, everything goes the way it's supposed to go. The buck stops with him. So he is a person of responsibility. He is a person who is known and respected within the community. He He's an important person within the community. You didn't just have any Yahoo be president of your synagogue. You had to have somebody who was responsible, somebody who knew how to get things done. And so there you go. He had reached really one of the pinnacles of position within his community. Um, he was, running the synagogue would be tantamount to being mayor of a community in nowadays because everything revolved around their religious life. The synagogue and being Jewish, worshiping Jewish, doing Jewish that was it. That was the way things were. And so this guy is a person of significance. Okay? Now, and then you have Jesus. And it's interesting that Jairus, couple things about Jairus. Number one, he is a man of faith. He comes to Jesus. And he has apparently, I would imagine, most everybody in that community at that point in time, probably around the Sea of Galilee, everybody knows who Jesus is. Everybody knows what he has done, what he's capable of. And someone has probably said to Jairus, maybe Jesus could do something here in this situation because your daughter is sick. She's extremely sick. At the time that Jairus leaves his home, she's close to death and, in fact, dies while he is away and getting Jesus. But give him credit. He put pride aside and he went and he asked for help. The story is told in French and literature of in the days of King Charlemagne. Charlemagne had a champion by the name of Roland. Roland was a mighty, mighty warrior, and the French army was retreating from the Spanish army, Armada, the Moors, and Roland was in charge of the rear guard. And they were attacked, ambushed, the rear guard was, as Charlemagne was making his retreat with the main army. And Roland and the rear guard fought valiantly. And Roland had a great trumpet called Olivant. And Olivant was so mighty of a blast, he had taken it from a giant, and if you sounded it, it could be heard 30 miles away. And the soldiers around Roland were begging him to blow his horn, because if he blew his horn, it was a distress sign, and Charlemagne would come back with the main army and rescue them. But Roland was a mighty warrior, and he was too proud to sound the blast and ask for help. The rear guard was his responsibility and his alone. And so, one by one, he and his men are being bested and are being slain. And finally, at the end, it's just Roland and against the Mongol hordes. And so he, with his dying breath, literally sounds his bugle, his horn, all of it. And sure enough, Charlemagne hears it, comes running to help out, but it's too late. All the rear guard is dead. And they are dead because Roland was too proud to ask for help. This father, Jairus, was not too proud to ask for help. He knew that this situation with his daughter, who was precious to him, was beyond his capabilities. He needed help, and he did not hesitate to ask for it. He did so in no uncertain terms. It says that he fell at Jesus' feet and begged Jesus. He said, I believe, Lord, that you can come and you can do something about this, that you can work and you can make a difference. Jesus consents. Now, Jesus is making his way through the crowd, and it's probably slow going because Jesus has rock star status at this point in the area. And everybody is, and we're told the part of the story that we skipped and we'll get into next time, has him basically, brushing and banging against other people, and it's slow going. And in the process of making his way, somebody comes from Jairus' house and gives him the heartbreaking news: don't bother the master anymore, your daughter's dead. which, as far as this person was concerned, they might have been a person of faith, but they believed that once death happens, that was it. It was beyond reach. It was beyond even Jesus's reach. Their faith didn't stretch that far. Jesus's word to Jairus, though, is, no, let's go on. Let's go to your house and let's see what we can do about this. Now, to Jairus' credit, although he might have been in shock and numb from the news, he listens to Jesus and he goes forward, and they get to the house. And he takes only the parents in, and Peter, James, and John, his inner three. Now, it's interesting. I would have liked to have been there because the mourners and the professional wailers were there. Wailers as in a wail of grief, W-A-I-L, wailing away. And the more important you were, the more wailers you had and the louder that they would wail, because an important person needs to be mourned and mourned properly and loudly. And so they're there. And Jesus says, stop. You don't need to do this. She's not dead. She's just asleep. And they laugh him to derision, the laugh of derision, the laugh of scorn. Yeah, you country bumpkin, what are you talking about? We've seen dead before. We see dead all the time. We're professional wailers, and we know dead, and dead is dead, and she's dead. Okay? So what are you talking about here? What do you know? And Jesus, in another version of the story, says he puts them out. He puts them out of the house. He runs them out. Get out of here. Whether he simply verbally told them to get out, or if he gave them the bum's rush. I kind of like to think he gave them the bum's rush, but and tossed them out into the street, and then goes in and he raises up the little girl, Talitha. Rise up. Get up here, little girl. And it's interesting, the practical touch that goes on here. Not only does Jesus raise her from the dead, then there's the practical touch. Give her something to eat. She needs a little nourishment here. Is it possible that he was thinking as much of the mother as the girl? Because, mother is beside herself now, has been with grief and now with relief. And the shock is maybe so great, Jesus is saying, hey, Mom, why don't you get busy and do something here? Get your mind a little bit distracted from everything and get her some food here now. It's usually doing the practical thing will distract you and get you out of the moment a little bit, especially if it's really, really emotional. So there's that to it. But I think here's a man, Jairus. Let's get back to Jairus for a second. The story is not so much about the resurrection as it's about Jairus. Here is a man who could put his pride in his pocket and forget about who he was or who he was supposed to be in the community. All he cared about was his child. And he was willing to go to Jesus, and it didn't matter. We're not told about what Jairus' opinion about Jesus was. He might have been more in league with the Pharisees, for example, and doubted about Jesus. That's quite possible because being in charge of the synagogue, he might have been more in touch with the high muckety-mucks and might have been more in tune with that kind of thinking. But he puts his pride aside and he goes and he asks. And he asks in no uncertain terms. He begs, come and help my child. If it's us, it's one thing. But when it's our children that are in need, it's a totally different situation, and we'll do whatever we have to do to help them and to make the situation right. That's just the way it is. Jairus is also a man of stubborn faith. When the word came that your child has died, he could have said, well, that's it. Nothing more it can do. Dead is dead. And no, he hung on and he took Jesus at his word. Jesus says, no, come on, let's go ahead and let's see what we can do here. Let me look at the exact wording. Jesus heard this. He said, don't be afraid, just have faith and she will be cured. Wow. One hand you have, she's dead, and the other has says, have faith. Well, it would have been easy to give up. It's always easy to give up and quit. Um, it's another thing. It's tough sometimes to have faith and believe, especially when there are people around you that are going, forget about it. And obviously, there were people that were there that were like that. Not only was it the person who came with the news, but it's also the people who were the wailers who said, she's dead, forget about it, who laughed him to derision. Not so. So the little girl is raised, and Jairus is a man of faith whose faith proves out and wins out. And thanks be unto God for that, for the fact he had stubborn faith. We all need to have stubborn faith sometimes, don't we? Sometimes you get to the end of your rope, but what do? You got to tie a knot and hang on, because you just got to believe, God is in this somehow, some way. God will see me through. God will see you through. Now, we will finish this story next time, because remember, this is a story within a story. Something happens along the way that slows things down, and also makes Jesus arriving at Jairus' home slow, which might have kind of chafed at Jairus a little bit, but we'll get into that part of the story next time. So, in the meantime, thanks for stopping by and spending a little time in the Word of God with me. And so I hope you enjoy this day. May the Lord bless you then real good.